Our sermon this morning is entitled, Leave the Gold. This is going to be our last look at the sin of Achan. You might call him Achan. We are talking about the sin he committed at Jericho, but the one that was exposed at the defeat at Ai. He stole some things that had been set apart. There were things that were set apart for destruction and things that had been set apart for the Lord. And he took them for his personal gain, and he was outed when they finally got whooped at Ai, something they had never experienced before that day. Today's message might be labeled more as instruction than preaching because we're going to focus on some practical application of what happened in this account. When I started studying on Achan and this sin, I was curious about God's instruction about these objects. One last time, to set the stage, let's go back and revisit the instructions that were given right before the walls of Jericho fell. This is in Joshua 6:18. And you, by all means, abstain from the accursed things, lest you become accursed when you take of the accursed things, and make the camp of Israel a curse and trouble it. But all the silver and gold and vessels of bronze and iron are consecrated to the Lord. They shall come into the treasury of the Lord. And once again, let's be reminded that this was in line with instruction to Moses back in Deuteronomy 7:25 and 26. This was what the Lord said to Israel had to be done with idolatrous items in the lands that they would conquer. You shall burn the carved images of their gods with fire. You shall not covet the silver or gold that is on them, nor take it for yourselves, lest you be snarled by it. For it is an abomination to the Lord your God. Nor shall you bring an abomination into your house, lest you be doomed to destruction like it. You shall utterly detest it and utterly abhor it, for it is an accursed thing. I don't think I've said it yet, but that verse right there should make us all pause just a little bit. The idea of bringing an abomination into your house. You know, we live in a very wicked world. There's not too much we can do about that other than to pray. The only thing we can do is to separate ourselves as much as possible. Now, we're not monks. We're not going to go live off in a cave together and not be around the world at all, but you do have some control about what comes into your house. Well, that'll be a fun one later. When the items were found in an idolatrous land, what becomes of the items depended on their use in the conquered land. That which was marked for a pagan god had to be destroyed. Even the gold atop the idol, what was overlaying it, had to be destroyed, because they would become accursed by interacting with what belonged to another god. The gold and silver that was not attached to an idol could be redeemed, but only for the work of the Lord. They were instructed that these other items that were not used in idol worship could be taken into what was called the treasury of the Lord for the work there. Now, I want us to stop for a minute and talk about idols. Talk about the making of idols, because I think if you can understand the process of making an idol, it might be easier to understand God's disdain for them, right down to the materials it took to put them together. To build an idol, you start off with people proclaiming that a power or a force has control over something in nature. That's the first step. They will decide there must be a force that's causing it to rain. There must be a force that's causing people to die. There must be a force that's causing the earth to flood. And then you associate that spirit that you now think has control with an object, usually in nature, like a rock or a river or a tree. This, by the way, is called animism, in case you're curious. And you know a song about animism, most likely, especially if you had a child or you're around a child in the 90s. There was a song, and it said, "You think you own whichever land you land on. The earth is just a dead thing you can claim. But I know every rock and tree and creature has a life, has a spirit, has a name." People get real hung up on Disney for what they do to the parents, and nobody notices, like, all the Disney movies have false religions all through them. Sorry. Come back next week, and I'll probably ruin Mulan for you. Eventually, you put so much thought into this spirit. What you do is you now associate the spirit with an object. So you start altering the objects and asking the spirit to dwell in it. So if the object was a rock, now you might start stacking the rocks up. Or if it was a tree, you might start moving the tree in different ways. And then you will ask that spirit to dwell in that object. That's the next step. And then as a people, and this is, anthropologically, this has been studied. As a people, what you would do next, that you have asked the spirit to dwell in this object, the next thing is that you put a lot of thought into the spirit to where you can understand its personality and understand its character so that you can begin to make carved or graven images that match the personality. That takes a lot of thought. If you notice, you might see statues or idols. For instance, a god that's very maternal will probably be a woman, right? That's what I'm talking about. And once you get to that point where you're able to make images conveying the spirit's personality, something that would convey the spirit's essence, the next thing that you would do is to make your own idol and bring it into your house with you. That's the kind of object the Bible's talking about in the Old Testament when it talks about an idol. A man-crafted thing that people look to as the provider of what only God can provide. In the New Testament, the word means the same if you're hearing idol in a very literal sense, but it can also be figurative for whatever you worship other than God. That's usually how we hear it described today when someone preaches about an idol. You'll hear them talk about your children being an idol, or your marriage being an idol, or money being an idol. That's usually the way it goes. Now, why does all of this matter? Because I want you to understand that when you see an idol, an object that is being worshipped, whether you see it in real life when you go to the Chinese restaurant, I'm ruining everything today, or you see it, and the orange chicken is so good. Ain't that just like the devil? To have the good orange chicken right there, and there's a Buddha when you walk in with incense, and they've got fruit that they're giving to it. Whether you see one in real life or whether you are reading it in the Bible, I want you to understand this. Idols are the result of a lot of time and thought. We minimize it. We minimize them. We make them down to just be objects. We act like it's just superstition, and that doesn't affect us. It's not just superstition. It's not art. It's not random. It's not creative. It is the result of false theological views. And at every turn in this idol-making process, they were robbing God at every single point. Let's start at the beginning. They tried to rob God of his all-powerful nature by claiming another spirit had control of some element of his creation. They tried to rob God of his purpose for his creation by deciding its intended use was for another god. They robbed God of communication with them when they began turning to those idols and the spirits that they represented for their help. They robbed God of communion with them when they brought the idols into their homes. Now we can see how much those idols that we often chalk up to an art project actually meant. Hopefully we can now understand why it would be so offensive to God that he would tell Israel, don't bring them into your house. See, that was the last step, bringing it into your house. So when he's saying don't bring it in, regardless if they were going to worship it or not, wasn't really the point. The point was they've now participated in the exact same thing that the pagans were doing, just by bringing it in the front door. Now, I can understand God not wanting people to keep a pagan idol that has an image of a false god on it. When I was writing this, I kept thinking about that episode of the Brady Bunch when they go to Hawaii. Y'all remember, some of y'all are old. Or you watched it on TV Land when I was a kid, and that's what TV Land used to be. I keep thinking about that picture of the talisman that they had that brought a curse onto them. That's the image in my head. You could understand why that might be a problem, right? But why couldn't they use the gold? He specifically said they couldn't even have the gold that was on it. And that doesn't make a lot of sense practically. A lot of people have a practical ministry. They want to tell you what works, why we can overlook what the Bible actually said and apply it differently. See, you can melt gold, you can reshape it, you can purify it. Just because it was part of this wicked thing doesn't mean it's all bad, right? Well, we don't drink, but this is the kind of place you need a 2-drink minimum to get into, I think, sometimes. I always wonder why the Lord, I used to watch comedians to try to get my timing right. Now I can figure it all out. Some of y'all, well, I'll leave it to myself. Why couldn't they keep the gold? Well, we got to talk about why they covered it in gold. Often, idols were made of wood or stone at the center, and then the overlay was the only part that was usually gold. Why did they cover them? In the culture of the Old Testament, gold was placed on idols to symbolize their divinity and their eternality. Because gold lasts. See, there's a fifth thing that they stole from God in their idol worship. They stole God's title of being the only eternal being. Because if He's not the only eternal being, He is not the all-powerful being who supersedes everything else. It's a big deal. Paul points it out in 1 Timothy 1:17, now to the King, eternal, immortal, invisible, to God who alone is wise, be honor and glory forever and ever. Amen. Paul could not hit the idols harder if he smacked one across its lifeless face than he does in this verse. See it now with what we know? He is taking full shot at idols with that verse. So let's ask the question again. Why couldn't they just recover the gold? And I'm not even talking about for personal use. I'm saying, as a minister, it would be helpful to be able to get that gold off of those idols, reshape it, and do something great with it. And in the command that we saw earlier, we know that gold that wasn't used with an idol could be put in the storehouse. So what's the difference? Just because this touched an idol, all of a sudden we can't use it? You're telling me all of a sudden I can't make good use out of it? It's recycling. God wants us to be good stewards. He wouldn't want to waste perfectly good resources. Doesn't it make more sense to take the idols, melt the gold, get that image off, and repurpose it? No, it doesn't. And the reason it doesn't is because the gold was just as much a thief of God's glory as the face of a false god, or the wood at its core that represented the power their God allegedly had over nature. I'm going to take you back and forth. This is your fair warning. We're going to go back and forth across several books of the Bible quickly, so you might just want to write them down, because I want to show you how idols rob from God and hopefully paint a better picture of what a big deal it is. Earlier we read Deuteronomy 7, where God told Israel what to do with the items involved in idolatrous worship. In the same chapter, he tells them the blessings that will come from obeying God's commandments. At this point, he's going to tell them in chapter 7 why they don't need idols. I'm going to start at verse 16. Also, you shall destroy all the peoples whom the Lord your God delivers over to you. Your eye shall have no pity on them. Nor shall you serve their gods, for that will be a snare to you. For you should say in your heart, these nations are greater than I. How can I dispossess them? You shall not be afraid of them, but you shall remember well what the Lord your God did to Pharaoh and to all Egypt. The great trials which your eyes saw, the signs and the wonders, the mighty hand and the outstretched arm by which the Lord your God brought you out. So shall the Lord your God do to all the peoples of whom you are afraid. Have no pity. Y'all knew you weren't going to escape today without a grammar lesson. You're used to it now. Nobody ever brings me an apple like I'm the English teacher, but y'all know it's coming every single week. And this grammar lesson might be the most important one I've ever shown you because of the application in this world we live in today. In New King James, there's a semicolon between the have no pity on them and nor shall you serve their gods. But in the original language, that word translated nor, it's the same conjunction we talked about before. And we talked before about when we see conjunctions in Hebrew, you cannot separate the two thoughts on either side, even more so than in English. That means that this is all joined as one thought. It's a big deal. It really is. Because it means the verse, I love this, it means the verse doesn't just say that serving false gods will be a snare. It says having pity on the idolaters was the snare too. The idolaters were willfully connected to the object of their worship, to the spirit connected to it, just as the Israelites were willfully connected to the object of their worship. And there could be no fellowship between the two. This ain't in this, but I'm going to toss it in because I feel it in my spirit. Because we are talking about idols and objects, and I'm not trying to get into a big, long conversation at the moment about attachment and demons and all this kind of stuff. But I will tell you this. I believe in all that. I really do. And I've had people think that I'm crazy because I'm very specific about what I let come into my house. And there are times I won't let something come into my house. And people can think that that's crazy if they want to, but we believe that in the New Testament, the Holy Spirit was in men, and that spirit was so strong that their clothes could be taken from them, and there was healing that went along with their clothes. That's how much we believe that. And what I'm here to say to you is that the devil will always have a counterfeit for whatever God does. So you can think I'm crazy if you want to, that there are times people hand me stuff and I say, I don't want that. But if we're going to believe that God does it, we're also going to have to accept that the devil will have a counterfeit of what the Lord can do. That's not the point. The point is this. If they had given into pity for the idolaters, they would have been given opportunity to say that their gods had rescued them. And Israel would have started to believe it. That's what he's pointing out about the fear. We live in an idolatrous time. When people look to everything else for what only God can provide. It is one of the greatest tricks of the enemy that he has convinced us that loving God means tolerance for the things associated with the enemy. One of my favorite things about Andy early on, especially in our marriage, was the way he judged people based on their treatment of me. I could mention somebody that did me wrong, and he'd say, oh, she is the worst person I've ever heard of in my life. And I'd say, you don't even know who she is. It didn't matter, because he knew me. Now, you could say that's unchristian. Whatever. We can hash that out later. It wasn't about knowing them. It was that he knew my character. And he knew that if somebody was set against me, that told him what he needed to know about them. Now, you can say, Lindsay, you are so off base. Bet me. Let me tell you about King David. He was that kind of man. In Psalm 139, that's the passage we all like. I love Psalm 139. It's one that I've memorized. Psalm 139 is the passage where David talks about how he was knit together in his mother's womb. It talks about God thinks about you all the time. You can't ever get away from his presence. You can't ever get away from his spirit. If I go up to heaven or if I make my bed in hell, I can never escape from him. It's a beautiful, encouraging psalm. And then, in David's beautiful, encouraging Psalm 139, right between him saying that God's thoughts towards him outnumber the grains of sand, and asking God to search his heart, David writes this uplifting stanza, starting at verse 19. Oh, that you would slay the wicked, O God! Depart from me, therefore, you bloodthirsty men. For they speak against you wickedly. Your enemies take your name in vain. Do I not hate them, O Lord, who hate you? And do I not loathe those who rise up against you? I hate them with perfect hatred. I count them my enemies. David didn't have to list out the enemies. He didn't have to list out what they had done. He just had to know the character of God. And he knew the character of God well enough to understand that anyone, any nation, any city that was against God, that had set itself up as God's enemy, was automatically David's enemy too. Yeah. Yes. If a people were against God, David would have no treaty with them. Neutrality does not mean you are a great example of a soldier of the Lord. It means you don't want to pick a side. And Kai's story was right. See, there is that fence. The problem is that God's side, the line is actually on this side of the fence. If you pick the middle of the road, you have already partnered with the enemy. It is black and white. I'm sick and tired of people telling me that the Bible is gray. No, it's not. If it's gray, get your eyes checked. Well, that's a gray area. No, it isn't. You're not searching hard enough. Are there complexities? Yeah. That doesn't mean it's not still plain. You know where else the word in Psalm 139 for hate gets used again? Well, it was found over there in Deuteronomy 16 and 21. You shall not plant for yourself any tree as a wooden image near the altar which you build for yourself to the Lord your God. You shall not set up a sacred pillar which the Lord your God hates. Well, Lindsay, that's the Old Testament. God doesn't have enemies in the New Testament because that's not how Jesus was. Well, James 4 is in the New Testament. And it's over there on the right-hand side of your Bible. Verse 3 says this: You ask and you do not receive because you ask amiss, that you may spend it on your pleasures. One of the most misused verses in the Bible. We'll talk about it some other time, because people take it and they use that to say, then I need to go and make people feel guilty until they give me a bunch of stuff. They didn't read the whole verse. It ain't talking about people, it's talking about God. Anyways, verse 4 says, Adulterers and adulteresses, do you not know that friendship with the world is enmity with God? Whoever therefore wants to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of God. God doesn't make enemies. No, we make ourselves his enemy. We do it. He doesn't set out for it. He doesn't want that. He wants communion and fellowship with you. But when you decide the world's way is the way you want to go, or when you just say, I'll just be neutral on it, it's the same thing, and it means that you have made yourself an enemy of God. James calls them adulterers because the image throughout the Bible of God's people turning to idols instead of him was that they committed adultery, abandoning the covenant with God. That's the picture. Imagine, if you're not married, just imagine you are for a second. Imagine that your spouse becomes best friends with someone of their opposite sex. So if you're a woman, imagine your husband becomes best friends with another woman. If you're a man, reverse that. And you find out that your spouse is going to this best friend of theirs for comfort, to handle their problems, to fix things for them. I know more than one woman in this room who would tell you that that would make that friend her enemy. I know it's more than one because me and my mama already make two. Yes, sir. This is either genetic or the way I was raised. I don't know, but either way, here I am. It's funny. This week, Andy took the boys on a boys' night, and when they went to eat, Andy's younger cousin was at the restaurant where they were, and she came up, and the boys have not met her or haven't seen her in a long time. And when she came, this young woman comes running up and hugs Andy, my sweet, precious Kai, now in the lead of favorite child after this. He would not let it go. He needed to know who that woman was, why she was talking to Andy, why she would think that she could hug his mother's husband. Raised upright. And then Henry immediately told me about it when they got home, so I'm doing right with both of them. Because let me tell you something, if there's some other woman doing that, we have us a big old problem. That woman, she might think she's his friend, but she'd be my enemy. James was making that important point. Adultery doesn't start out in a cheap motel room. It starts out as friendship. And we usually don't break covenant with God with a major sin. I don't think any of us has put a big idol in our house, probably. But it starts with saying, can't I just keep a part of the idol? Why can't I just reshape it? Clean it up? Why can't I keep the shiny part? The worthwhile part? You know what it sounds like to us today is, I'm not like I used to be, but I don't have to give up everything. It'll be okay. It'll be fine. I'll just set out some boundaries. That sounds great. Except God already set the boundaries. And just like he already had purpose for the trees, when the idolaters decided to give them a new purpose, you making up your own boundaries is not religious, it's not righteous, it's idolatry. It's you leaning on your wisdom instead of his. Long before Joshua's men arrived at Jericho, Moses already showed his contempt for even the materials used in idolatry. Do you remember what Moses did with the golden calf? He didn't just take that calf that they had made out of their jewelry and tear it up. He didn't just smash it. Exodus 32:20 said he took the calf which they made, he burned it in the fire, he ground it to powder, he scattered it on the water, and he made the children of Israel drink it. They didn't get their earrings back. And they didn't get to melt it back down for gold that they would need in the tabernacle either. They only had their jewelry because they were allowed to take it out of Egypt with them. That was a blessing. That was a gift that God gave to them because they were going to need it later on for that tabernacle. He gifted them, and they took what he gifted to them, and they turned it into worship for this worthless God. And once they did that, he wasn't giving it back. He didn't want it anymore. The idolatry came at a personal cost they could not get back. You know why? Because if they could have got it back, they would have made a habit of making an idol for every season and then melting it and molding it back for their personal use later. Because we would do the same thing. How do I know that? Because that's what we do when we go back and forth between serving the Lord and running to something else for what only he can give. Psalm 106, 19-22 tells us something about idols when the psalmist laments the building of the golden calf in this way. They made a calf in Horeb, and they worshiped the molded image. Thus, they changed their glory into the image of an ox that eats grass. They forgot, everybody say forgot. They forgot God, their Savior, who had done great things in Egypt, wondrous works in the land of Ham. That's not a Jimmy Dean commercial. It's talking about Egypt. They forgot the awesome things by the Red Sea. Now, what was that we said happened in Deuteronomy 7? Oh, yeah. God said, remember well what I've done for you. Right. And he said, don't tolerate idols. That's right. Because the tolerating of the idols would cause them to forget. If you've got the ADHD, we have this thing called object permanence. It means if we don't see something right in front of us, it doesn't exist. It includes people too. So if you love someone with ADHD and they forget you exist, please give them grace. That's kind of what happens. They had already been warned of how good God had been to them. You've seen his outstretched hand. Sure, maybe it wasn't in metal that you could carry around with you and mold how you wanted to, but you've seen it. You've seen his works. You've seen his signs. You've seen his wonders. But if you get an idol in front of you that you can put your eyes on, you're going to give the credit to it instead of God. And that's what happened. Now the psalmist, on the other side of the story, he tells us it's exactly what happened, just what God warned them about. They forgot what God had done when they engaged in idolatry. I would submit to you, an idol is not just something you put above God. It's whatever makes you forget about God. It's what makes you think that your success, your joy, your peace, your love come from any source outside of him and his commands. And I would also submit this, that the idol does not have to be completely intact to be an idol. Whatever parts remain have to be destroyed, because otherwise your mind will continually be pulled back in. I can't remember where my keys are. Most days, I can't tell you what I did yesterday. But I've got clothes in my closet that when I see them, I can tell you exact moments in my life. I've had to literally throw clothes away because it would take my mind to moments I didn't want to keep going to. That's what happens with an idol, even a part of it. The command to not take the items set apart for destruction meant Israel was going to leave some gold behind. That just sounds like a waste. Until you realize leaving the gold behind meant they left the curse behind too. Assuming you're already saved, that the Lord has forgiven you of your sins and he brought you into a new life, this is now my question as we're winding down. I'm not questioning your salvation in this, but I am asking if you have brought any parts of your idolatrous life with you. Have you justified bringing pieces of your old life into your new life, thinking that you're strong enough to redeem them? The only Redeemer is Jesus. And I got to tell you, there's a reason he gives you a brand new life, that you must be born again, because there's nothing good in you. There's nothing good in me. The death of Jesus released us from the curse of sin. So why would you try to bring cursed things into this new, uncursed life? And how could you expect that would end good? In the first week, talking about AI, we learned that the word accursed, it was the same word used for the devoted things that were separated for the Lord's sanctuary, as it was the word used for items separated out for destruction. The exact same word. It denoted exclusivity. And we've seen over and over these last few weeks that if you were to mess with the things with that label on them, you become that thing. You mess with the wicked things, you will now partake in the curse on those wicked things. And I would submit to you this thing called holiness or sanctification. It's not about a checklist, but I will tell you this, that the more you're associating with the holy things set apart for the Lord, I do believe it will assist you in becoming holy as he is holy. It's time for separation. Every item in the pagan land was deemed separated, but the purpose depended on the item. What was marked for idolatry was separated for destruction. What was not marked for idolatry was separated for God's service. You will be separated to God for his use, or you will be separated from God and marked for destruction. You don't get out of this thing without being separated one way or the other. And the line is on this side of the fence. We always ask God to search our hearts. I told you this was more instructional. I guess I'm a liar today. Unintentional. When we talk about idols, yes. I do believe that there are times that means something physical that should not be in our possession. I do. I think there are things that we have in our homes that either they're associated, that you might have stuff in your house that's associated with the occult. Yeah, I might go into that another day because that would take a whole lot of time. You have no business having that in your house. None. Because you're becoming a participant, just like they were. And sometimes you don't know any better. You know why? That's why we ask God, search my heart. And maybe we should add, search my home, Lord. Show me, God, is there something here that doesn't please you? But it doesn't have to be a pentagram. I don't think if you have a pentagram framed on your wall or anything. It can be anything that's taking your eyes off of Jesus and leading you to wickedness. It also doesn't have to be that bad either to be a problem. It might be something that's reminding you of the life that you came from. And you have sat until the last 30 minutes thinking, well, I'm good though. I'm saved, I'm a Christian, so, I can do, and you want to hang on that verse from Paul, talking about your liberty. And you have taken advantage of that verse. Because here's the truth. If I'm separated to God, I will have no taste or thirst for those things anymore. And the closer I get to him, the further I will want to get from everything else. This isn't judgment from me. This is fact. You are going to be separated. Which one's it going to be? So yes, it might be an object. It might be something in your house. Again, I say, ask God, search my house. Is there something that's not here? Is there something that's leading me to destruction? Is there something... If you are an alcoholic, I don't think you need to keep a memorial beer up for you to see. It's my opinion. I don't think you need to be reminded of what that life was. Because the truth is you're testing yourself. And you're going to fail the test. You know why you're going to fail the test? Because you're not fully separated to God. But it's not just objects. It might be your choices. Hanging on to doing certain things, going certain places, being around certain people, and you think, I'm good, until you're not going to be good anymore. And we see it in the Old and the New Testament. You can't say Jesus erased all this business. No, he did not, because he did not come to abolish the law, but to fulfill the law.